Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Discographers. We were lucky enough to interview Ilan Rubin. He's had a storied career working with Nine Inch Nails, Angels and Airwaves, Paramore, and others. And most recently, his solo band, The New Regime, put out a full-length record called Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul. I had a wonderful time talking with him, so please enjoy the interview. All right, well, hello, Ilan. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well.
So I think we'd like to go ahead and just get right down to the bat, with really hard-hitting questions. The first one is, how do you get your hair to do that?
Well, I sleep a lot, and the technique I use to roll out of bed when I finally decide to wake up is really where this all comes from.
That is absolutely wonderful. All right, now on to more serious stuff. Clearly, you've been doing music for quite some time. Are you schooled in music theory, or are these kind of bold chord choices on unconventional scales that you use so often something you figured out by ear?
Both. I have to say, I educated myself musically in terms of theory and harmony and all that fun stuff. I've always enjoyed it, and I've always been a very good self-learner in terms of buying a ton of books and absorbing the information. However, I do not use any of it to approach writing music, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the great thing about having a knowledge of theory is that it helps you analyze music, things that you like. You can actually figure out what it is about music that makes it tick for you, you know? Or if I run into a corner where I'm like, I actually don't know where to go here purely based on instinct, what are my options? Then you're able to kind of see what paths open up via theory, you know? And harmony as well.
Oh, yeah.
I can't stand people who are mediocre songwriters and think that having an ounce of music knowledge is going to hinder their precious creativity.
It's just another tool in your belt. I've gone on the rant on the podcast a million times saying music theory is not prescriptive. It is descriptive. It's just helps you understand what's happening. That's it. It's not rules.
It's literally like people saying, I want to be a great writer, except I don't know what grammar is.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
Yeah.
You can be a skilled conversationalist, but if you can't spell a word, you're going to look pretty stupid, you know, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, let's see here. Looks like your brother is also a musician. So was playing music a big part of your childhood together?
Yeah, it's the reason why I didn't have one. I'm totally kidding. I had a childhood. I wasn't one of those, you know, but I did start music very young, about 7.5, 8 years old, started playing drums. I have two older brothers. My oldest, who is the one you are mentioning, I'd imagine, is my manager and has been managed since about 6 years. But we grew up playing bands together, all three brothers actually. And for quite some time, my middle brother was playing bass in the New Regime live. So we're extremely close-knit and a tight family unit. But yeah, I mean, they dabbled in music before I did, considering they're 5 and 8 years older than I am.
Fair enough, yeah. So does that make you the baby of the family then?
The baby and the best, you know? My parents got it right on the third.
Same boat.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
All right. So clearly you have a lot of musical influences and a lot of them come out and they're kind of all over the place. Can you talk to me about maybe two real obvious influences and maybe a couple that are more obscure that people would have to go digging for?
Oh, well, that's a good way of phrasing this question, because I don't know if you know anything about me, but anytime I talk about influences or discuss what I like, I immediately start gushing about like the same three people. You know, I mean, I have far more up my sleeve than that. But in terms of the stuff that really hits me consistently, I don't know if you pick it up based on the music solely, but perhaps a tinge here or there. I mean, my favorite of all time, without a doubt, is Led Zeppelin. Surprise, surprise. Beatles, and so on and so forth. Now, you may catch moments of those things that present themselves in the music, but by no means would you listen to the New Regime and be like, this guy's a Led Zeppelin fanatic. I mean, sure. I'm not in dragon pants or have my chest out on stage or anything, you know, dressed in whatever. But you get what I'm saying. So those are personally my biggest influences, and you may find bits and pieces of them here and there, but stuff that may be a little less obvious. I'm a massive Jeff Buckley fan, and
Oh yeah.
I've learned quite a few of my chord voicings from learning some of his songs. So all of that stuff kind of makes its way in there at some point or another. But really, I always try to keep everything versatile and different from anything that I've done. So I'd suppose that, an ounce of Buckley here, Zeppelin there, Radiohead there, a little bit of harmony that I've picked up from, who knows, Beethoven, Schubert. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to sound
Yeah.
pretentious. Literally, this is how diverse my influences are, and they all find a way to help make up I am as a songwriter. So
And
it's
I've
right now.
definitely noticed
Yeah.
just how many different angles pop in,
Mhm.
I'm hearing, bits of Bowie, bits of Queen, again, bits of just some more kind of classical runs on the actual instrumental melodies and whatnot. It's been really interesting going through your entire discography over the time preparing for this and just kind of listening to, wow, this really does go everywhere. It's been
Oh,
a unique thing.
I'm glad you picked up on that. Thank you. It's really funny because when I first started the new regime, and it's been an oddly long while, although it doesn't feel that way because of the various other things that have taken up years of my time or that I've devoted years of time to. But when I first started the new regime and writing my own songs, from the very onset, I said to myself, I'm going to write every song drastically different from one
Mhm.
another, because whoever becomes a fan of the band or me as a songwriter, I want them to constantly anticipate something new. There are bands who have their sound and it's the same whether it's album 1 or it's album 5. And hey, if you like that, then great. But everything that I've loved has had a very definitive evolution. And early on, a lot of people, whether it be labels or publishers or whatever, had a really hard time putting me in a box, which is stupid. I think it's very counterintuitive. And it's like, well, what is this? Are you a rock band? Is it more pop? Is it more electronic? What are you? I'm like, who gives a shit? It's good. And listen to it. And what's funny is that you fast forward however many years later, and I keep reading articles about our genres dying because so many things are crossing from alternative to pop, or obviously hip hop, country. All these sorts of mutations of music are finding their way to the most popular outlets, and you now find people saying that genres stupid, really, to really have to define something by what category it's in. So it's funny to see where things kind of go and the course they take. But I've always found the idea that you have to have your one sound as completely idiotic.
Well, I mean, it's constrictive, like it's suffocating
It, it,
from a creative standpoint.
yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not comparing myself, but the most legendary evolution I would say is the Beatles, given the span.
Hmm.
But imagine if Brian Epstein was like, guys, Please Please Me was exceptional, and you guys need to just do that.
For
And,
forever now.
and they break up in 1970 doing Twist and Shout and Chains, and it's just like
Yeah.
that. It's ridiculous, and I don't know if it's people have more of a short term, let's see what we can do with this and cash out as soon as possible sort of mentality. I have no idea, but I think anything that's great has to change because you're
Yeah.
always exploring and searching for something new, and you will cease to do that if you're just trying to repeat yourself. There's my
Well,
tirade.
I got to tell you, you just answered like three of my pre-written questions
Well, that means
on your own with no prompting there.
we're on the same page.
Hell yeah,
Like,
man.
pardon my quarantine facial hair. I mean, this is not a look that I'm cultivating. Uh,
Just out of razors, huh?
when
I'm
I looked at the email, I'm like, Google Hangout, what is that? I'm like, oh shit, I may have to be exposed here, letting you into my zone.
there we go.
Yeah,
It's the quarantine fashion zone. Let's roll.
exactly.
So,
So yeah, what else?
what was the inspiration and or like impetus for starting New Regime in the first place? Um was it mainly because you had a collection of songs that you wanted to start putting out, or was it more about having the project?
Neither actually.
Awesome.
I okay. So backing up here a little bit, I started playing drums at 7.5, 8 years old. having the two older brothers we discussed earlier, they moved on to guitar and bass, and I had access to those instruments. And the same obsession would kind of take over me when I'd learned something on an instrument. If I learned a riff on guitar, I couldn't put the thing down. And then that became, well, what else can I learn on guitar? I'm gonna learn a scale. I'm gonna learn a lead. So that same like craving of knowledge and needing to get better would take over me on every instrument I played. So by the time I was 18, I found myself to be speaking frankly, a very good guitar player, pianist, bassist, drummer, so on and so forth. And I thought, well, what is the point of being able to do all of this if I can't sing? That's the most important thing, especially if you want to write music. So I honestly forced myself. And I suppose the impetus was extreme frustration, having been the drummer in bands where, depending on what your method of recording is, I mean, more often than not, the drummer's the first one in and out of the studio. And then you have to spend your time waiting for everybody else to finish. You have to wait for mixing. You have to wait for mastering before shows get booked. And from the time I would record drum tracks and anticipate the following tour, it could have been 8 months. It could have been a year, and I would see people and their way of recording and honestly, irritatingly think to myself, I could do this so much faster. Like, I don't want to wait for these guys. This is bullshit, right? And so that and the realization that I needed to sing to truly take my destiny into my own hands, for lack of a less pretentious phrase, I forced myself to do it, came up with the new regime. And once I wrote my first song, which is a song called Some Things, which is on my first album, Coup, I thought, I can do this, and I'm going to. And Coup is actually the first 10 songs I've ever written. So
wow.
My songwriting journey is very well documented in terms of the new regime discography.
Well, I'm just sitting here also as a multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, singer, and just being annoyed by how good that first album is, knowing how early that is in your timeline. But
well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But yeah, so funny enough, the last song on the album was the first song I ever wrote, and nice. the first song on the album is the second one I ever wrote. So there's a lot of piano-based music on there, and the piano is a common thread throughout the new regime. I suppose the amount of piano input or output kind of diminished from release to release, but really since I've put out my most recent album, I've got this new beautiful Roland digital upright, and I haven't been able to stop writing songs on it. So
nice.
Who knows what the next album's going to be, but there you have it.
Just piano sonatas.
Got a long in an unforeseeable amount of time on my hands, apparently.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Well, definitely want to get into the current situation eventually, but first I want to ask you the obnoxious question: how many instruments do you actually play?
Are we counting vocals?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I would say 5. Well,
5. Well, yeah.
Okay. That's what the new regime is basically comprised of. Now, look, I've dabbled with plenty of other things that have made it onto recordings, but am I going to call myself a ukulele player or a cellist or a glockenspiel player? No. But I do possess quite a few instruments, and funny enough, I put in an order for a clarinet the other day. I don't know what possessed me. 2 a.m, I was like, you know what? I don't play a wind instrument, and I think that's a good one to start on. So I bought one, and should be here any day now, unless somebody turns over the delivery truck looking for toilet paper and hand sanitizer. It should be here soon.
Okay. So would you say now, obviously singing was sort of the vehicle to kind of, again, get you in control of your own sort of songwriting journey here. But in terms of instruments other than vocals, would you say that you have one that's a favorite?
I don't. And I truly mean that. And really the reason is that every instrument shines in its own way. Yeah. Nothing can duplicate rhythm and energy the way a drum set can. Nothing can cover as much musical ground at one time as a piano can. So for that very reason, I will wholeheartedly say and believe that the piano is the greatest instrument of all time. I mean, it's no secret that almost I can't think of a great composer whose main instrument was not the piano. I'm not saying everybody has to be a virtuoso, but it just makes the most sense. And when I started playing, I remember one of my friends in high school whose dad was a pianist was like, when it comes to theory, it's all laid out there black and white, and
Oh yeah.
but literally. So I
Yeah.
thought that was brilliant. But yeah, you can't. I mean, it makes you look at music differently. And
Mhm.
let's say you are a guitar player, having just the most minute amount of piano knowledge could open up the guitar in so many ways to different inversions, to playing voicings of chords that have either the third or the fifth on the bottom, as opposed to just root notes and
Yeah.
bar chords and all that stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
it just really makes you look at things differently. I mean, the piano, the one thing that is frustrating about the piano and is excellent about the piano is that there's no one shape that really takes place across the keyboard. I mean, the
Yeah.
reason why so many people are able to get away with being self-taught as a guitar player
Hmm.
or a bass player is because you can take your one shape and move it anywhere on the neck and it's going to do its job.
Hmm.
You know, you don't have to know which notes you're playing, what intervals you're playing. You can look at it as a series of dots, spaces. Uh, Here's my bar chord, and if I lift my finger up, now it's a minor chord. Stuff
Yeah.
like that. That doesn't work
Absolutely.
with the piano. And if you're going to take something from one key to another, you have to know how to do that, or it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and then there's nothing more instructive than just the simple linear layout of a piano. If you want to understand music, it is where you go.
Exactly. But the fact that you can take the same position of a major scale on a fretboard and just move
Yeah.
it half step at a time, you can't do that on a piano. You have to learn it
Oh no.
very often a different fingering pattern, and that's
Oh
with
yeah.
both hands. So it's far more of a it's a far deeper instrument.
Oh yeah.
And really, I'm not saying I mean, there are incredible guitarists out there who make all of those realizations on the guitar, but I just think there's no way around it on the piano. You have to know the way music is sort of designed, I guess. You
Yeah.
have to know the way it works and functions. So I think the piano's the greatest, but playing a riff on a guitar, you can't touch that feeling either,
Yeah.
especially with the various sounds you can come up with. I mean, that's what I love about guitar. And have a different set of pickups, different amp, different style of guitar, brand, different pedals, and it'll make you play differently. And it'll spark a different feeling of creativity. And you don't really get that on drums. It's just everything has its strong suits and sort of deficiencies, if you will, deficits. But yeah, there you go.
So uh, love how thorough and earnest that answer was. Makes me so happy, and I could not agree more. But okay, songwriting process. Do you have a defined one, or do you go in lyrics first, music first, or is it however it strikes you at the time?
However, it strikes me, although lyrics last almost 99% of the time,
Hmm.
just because I approach everything musically.
Yeah.
So, the best case scenario for me is when I'm doing the music and the lyrics at the same time. Sometimes both ideas are in sync with each other, and the song sort of writes itself. But usually, what sparks an idea or the planting of the seed to to finish a song is me sitting at the piano or a guitar,
Mhm.
excuse me, messing around in Pro Tools, and all of that comes from a musical place. It's not like I'm just sitting there doodling lyrics. I'm like, now I have a song. That's not where I come from. But
Mhm.
I totally respect and appreciate those who sort of write lyrics without having any sort of melody in mind, write music, and then find a way where they meet. I think Sting writes that way, or at least wrote that way. I'm an enormous Police fan, and I think that's the way that he tackled it,
Mhm.
and that's great. But in terms of the spark of inspiration, that really comes from sound for me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, and I definitely, again, in listening through to your discography a couple times leading up to this, I definitely see how much the lyrical content does underscore the tone of the song.
Mhm.
Like they're just very complete pieces of work,
Well,
and I think that makes sense.
well, thank you, and I appreciate you doing such great research and really putting in the time.
So do you have any particular song of yours that you could pinpoint, as you say, it is being maybe a turning point for your solo career? Anything where you felt like, wow, this is occurring? Could be at any point.
Uh, um, I don't know why, but the first song that comes to mind would be "Live in Fear" off of my second album. But I think structurally it's very different. I think it's very dynamic. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Interesting chord voicings that we talked about, so on and so forth. I mean, it's not like the song was a single or anything like that, but there's something about being able to mix all of these influences, dynamics, and come up with something that really felt unique
Mm-hmm.
would sort of be summed up in that song at the time. But everything I do at the time, I'm very proud of, and I always fulfill the vision of what I want the release to be. And when I move on to the next thing, I don't really want to hear anything that's come out previous. So it's tough. I mean, certain things, I guess the ones that are a little most out there, like Voices Calling, for example, off of Exhibit B, is something I'm very
Mm-hmm.
proud of because I just let the sound take me. I wasn't gonna try to put something like that in a box in terms of what's the structure going to be. I just wrote music and I'm very content with how it came out. Sweet Kind of Suffering on Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul, the latest, is something that really sticks out to me. Now, are these the catchiest songs? No. Are they singles? No. But there's something about them artistically and creatively that I'm very proud of. What Brings Us Down is another one that I'm very proud of off of Speak Through the White Noise. But everything I'm proud of in one way or another. And these are songs that, like I said, kind of take you places. But every release I feel has something that sticks out to me for one reason or another. But I wouldn't say there's a definitive turning point. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe if I
Just
really, really thought about it, but yeah, Live in Fear came to mind.
very nice. All right. So, and now I'm juggling windows. Bear with me. There we go. So, do you have any recommendations for somebody who would like to become a full-time musician or songwriter?
God, I wish I did. I'm I'm not kidding. I mean, the troublesome part is you said full time, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult as you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine.
Yep.
And I wish there was some sort of clear cut advice, but at the same time, I don't really think there is for anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to approach this answer a little more positively. I mean, just as with anything, you want to be good at it. You want to
Mm-hmm.
know everything you possibly can about whatever it is you're pursuing. So whether that means listening to a bunch of music, analyzing the music that you like, trying to write as much music as you possibly can, and really putting in the time. I mean, does that translate into a career? Absolutely not, because I'd say most successful people in popular music don't know what they're doing, or these days require 8 or 9 people to help write a song. That's just the climate we're in these days, and I do find it very unfortunate. I'm not talking about everybody by any means. I mean, there are plenty of great people out there who are struggling for the same spots, and I'm very fortunate to be a drummer in larger bands and use that to a lot of times my advantage in terms of the new regime. But even as the new regime, I have, and as a songwriter, I'm jumping hurdles on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
and as proud of my music as I am, it's not like I've got a charting single or whatever. So there are so many facets of what it takes to be something full time, whether we're talking about popularity, whether we're talking about monetary success. I mean, there certainly isn't any advice that could help facilitate those things. All I can say is, just with anything else, be as good at it as you possibly can. If you want to be a doctor, you're going to go through school. If you want to be a painter, you're going to paint a lot. Maybe go to school as well. I don't know what their process is, but you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And without kind of adding any confusion to it, I'm not saying that you have to go to school by any means to be a successful musician. I'd say that most of them are not educated properly in terms of music, but it always helps, put in the effort. That's all I can really say. And don't be a dick. Okay. So many opportunities come from relationships, and relationships come from being a good dude. And if you're a dick, those are probably going to fall through the cracks. That's a big one. So there you go.
So real. Okay, well, so talking about the way that you kind of supported yourself while playing with other bands, and we ask you a little bit about some of those experiences with Nine Inch Nails and Angels and Airwaves. Yeah. All right. Well, how did you come to join the live lineup for Nine Inch Nails? It was back in 2008, I believe.
Yeah. So I was playing at the Reading and Leeds Festival in 2007, and the band I was with at the time, which shall remain nameless, was playing just before Nine Inch Nails. And a friend of mine who worked with the band for quite some time recommended to Trent that he go watch me play. And to this day, I'm baffled that he actually did. But Trent watched me play, and it was probably about a year later that I read online Josh Freese was leaving Nine Inch Nails, and before you knew it, I received an email from Trent saying, "Hey, this is Trent from Nine Inch Nails. Saw you play. Are you interested in playing drums?" And I said, "Absolutely." And we took it from there. He sent me a list of songs. I flew out to a sound check on the Lights in the Sky tour, which was taking place then in late 2008. Got the job, so to speak, and I've been with Nine Inch Nails for 11 years now.
That is so righteous. All right, so to date, you are the only drummer to be trusted with playing The Perfect Drug live. I'm curious if you can tell us anything about how that conversation went down.
Okay, I'll be very honest with you. Okay, and Trent has stated many times that he didn't really play the song live because he didn't like the song that much. Okay, sure. Now the preliminary rehearsals of that song, whether they took place in late 90s, early 2000s, I don't know. Maybe they didn't go well, and that further soured the taste in his mouth for the song. I don't know. But as a drummer, I always thought it was totally doable. Like, I don't really see why this isn't meant to, why this can't go over well live. And for one, I never pushed it because Trent's songs, he comes up with the set lists, I do my job, and that's that. But for the run that we did in 2018, he wanted to throw some surprises out in terms of touring, especially since it was kind of divided up in legs and we were doing multiple shows per city. And when you do that, you obviously want the shows to be drastically different from one show to the next, because you can imagine you have a lot of repeat customers as fans who were going to all nights. So we had some tricks up the sleeve, and that was one of them. If I'm not mistaken, I think the first time we played it was at Red Rocks in Colorado. And just when those kind of like unfretted string instrument sliding tonalities came out, people lost their mind, and it was awesome. But when we tried it with this lineup at rehearsals, it worked quite well. And, whether he loves the song or not, I think he thought, you know what, we're doing the song justice, and I think people will enjoy it. So the funny thing to me is that for whatever reason, the drums have always been they got to find somebody who can play it, and I don't know why that was ever such a big issue, to be honest with you.
I mean, they're just aggressive, funky drums. It's basically what's going on. So the amen break is in there almost.
Yeah, and I never saw why that was an issue. The thing that I found funny, and I suppose the thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that when you have programmed drums or heavily sequenced music, it's not about replicating things note for note. It's about making them come alive with acoustic drums. So it's not like I sat there thinking, okay, I need every little individual note and dynamic, and I need to play like a machine, and so on and so forth. That's not the point. The point is bringing across the energy that's in the recording. Now, when it comes to that signature drum break towards the end after the whole, noise section, that I played note for note every night, but everything else I pretty much improvised within the confines of what we were trying to achieve. But what I found hilarious is that once the bones of the song were well rehearsed amongst the band. Trent always likes to kind of throw just a little bit more into the pot. Where it's like, do you think you can do the falsetto part in the verses while I'm doing all the snare drum stuff? Do you think you can do the like double robin on the vocal and the pre-chorus?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we're done with this song. Once you finish that break, can you go over to the piano and play this melody? And I love that. I mean, it keeps things so exciting,
Yeah.
But what's funny is that by the time that the drummer was able to play the song, it was the drummer and then singing some backups and then playing some piano, and he's always knows how to keep it exciting. So it was great. I love it.
Well, it has been a tremendous experience. So, changing gears here, how did you come to start playing drums for Angels and Airwaves?
Um, that is a little bit hazier, even though it's slightly more recent. Um, I suppose, long story short, that um, when Adam Willard, who was the original drummer, was no longer with the band for whatever reason that was, Tom and I had a mutual friend who recommended me. And I was off the road with Nine Inch Nails. I was doing my New Regime stuff, and we had a phone conversation. And I thought it'd be fun. I mean, this was the first time I would have been in a band from San Diego in many years.
Mm-hmm.
And we got along well. I got along very well with the other guys in the band, and we kind of just took it from there. Although, in hindsight, it's very odd because we hardly toured when I first joined the band. I mean, the band pretty much fell apart, and Tom decided he didn't want to tour anymore for whatever reason, and that's why there was a sort of 7-year hiatus between the tour this winter or whatever it was towards the end of the year last year and 2012, maybe it was.
Some in that neighborhood, yeah.
And I don't think it was a definitive I'm not touring anymore, but when you add up the time, it was about 7 years. And that meant that the working partnership was more of a recording thing, but really that kind of culminated in the Dreamwalker, which came out in 2014. And that was written whenever him and myself happened to be in San Diego, because he was still with Blink and I was with Nine Inch Nails. So we'd kind of have to find those pockets of time to work. And that's that. Honestly, everything post Dreamwalker up until the tour of September last year is a real blur and a haze, because we didn't do much work. I played drums on stuff, but really that was him just kind of, hey, I'm going to put out an EP that's 4 songs, and that's that, and I was very busy with a lot of other things, New Regime touring, other sessions here and there. And it's a very, the reason why I suppose it's so hazy in terms of the chronology is because he does so many different things that have nothing to do with music as well, that the gaps in time can be quite lengthy. So it's very easy to sort of mentally check out, especially when I have so many things of my own that I'm working on.
Yeah.
Or have worked on, so yeah, that answers that question, hopefully.
Yeah. So coming off that tour that you just did with them, you were also playing as the opening act on that tour.
The support act, man. Support
act is that the appropriate nomenclature? I don't.
Yeah,
pardon me. I am plebeian scum.
Now that was with humor, of course, but so this was a three band bill. So the opener is obviously first. Support is just before the headliner, and the headliner.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I was playing second of 3 and third of 3, and it was an amazing time. I was very fortunate and pleasantly surprised that the Angels and Airwaves audience was I was very fortunate that they were very accepting of my music and myself, because the New Regime sounds nothing like Angels and Airwaves. You could not find a single song that is reminiscent of Angels. And that being said, Tom has a fairly fanatical or very fanatical fan base. So I didn't know what to expect, but fortunately they took to me very kindly, and I had a fantastic time with my band. And it was a very fun experience being able to go out on stage as a frontman, play my new music, then get off stage, practically take off my jacket, drink some water, and get back on stage and play drums. And the the sort of looseness and comfort you gain from hitting the stage a second time is incredible, because
Hmm.
usually you kind of have those an anxiety of some sort, whether it's an excitement of not wanting to contain yourself and just get out there, or a bit of nerves. Everyone handles it differently, but for me, I get that anxiety where I'm just like, God, I just want to go out and play already. The hour before a show is the worst part of my day. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
If I had it my way, somebody would tap me on the shoulder and be like, you got to be on stage in 2 minutes. And I'd be like, ah, shit, and get my energies in and go run the stage. That's great, because there's no time to think about everything. I can't stand it. But when you go on stage for a second time, you've already gone through that and you're just so comfortable and ready to go. So I had a great time on that tour.
So do you think that's something you would consider doing again then?
I would. I don't think
Doing that
Tom would.
double
But
decker?
I certainly would. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. All right, let's take a look. So what was your involvement like with Paramore's self-titled record?
Well, my involvement was purely that of a session drummer. I was called in. My friend Justin Melville Johnson, who I played in Nine Inch Nails with in 2009, was their producer, and he called me in to play. Um, the idea that I toured with them for a little bit was completely out of nowhere. We got along so well, and I had such a good time playing with those guys. And funny enough, this is the only time I've ever played with people who were either my age or younger.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you can imagine, Nine Inch Nails, Angels and Airwaves, everyone is, even growing up, starting as a drummer and playing in my brother's high school band, I was 8 years younger. So I've just always been used to being by far the youngest. So that was my first experience kind of playing with people my own age or younger. And we got along so well that it was a tricky time in the sense that I couldn't say that Nine Inch Nails was going to be gearing back up to tour, because that was just secretive at the time. But they had asked me if I was willing to tour. And of course I was, but I had to say, look, I have this commitment in May. This was 2013. And I said, I'd love to play with you guys, but I would imagine you would want a drummer to start and finish the run. I mean, it just only makes most sense. I'm like, that would be great, but we would love for you to play with us as long as you can, and we'll just figure it out. So I was really happy that that was their mindset. And we did a little bit of touring. I wish it was more. I wish that the two cycles didn't overlap.
Mm-hmm.
As I've stated many times, it was a great time. But yeah, I did some festivals with them in Australia. We did some shows in Asia, a couple of one-offs in Europe and the US, and a couple of TV performances. So it was fun, and it probably felt a little longer than it actually was, just because the territories were so diverse.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a great time, and I had to go back to Nine Inch Nails, which was obviously a great time as well. So that's pretty much it. Now that's my involvement with the band. I mean, I'm still loosely in touch
Mm-hmm.
with the band. In fact, I mean, funny enough, I've never met their original drummer Zach, but
Mm-hmm.
I was randomly at Home Depot a couple weeks ago. Something broke or I needed something. I'm deceivingly handy. You might not. Think that. But I was looking for something, and I see this guy. I'm like, is that Zach from Paramore? I'm like, what's weird? But I didn't go up to him and be like, hey, I play drums. I play drums. It's just weird. But I thought it was a funny sort of coincidence. And I texted Taylor, the guitar player. I'm like, am I nuts, or did I just pass by your drummer at Home Depot? He's like, yeah, he lives out there now. I'm like, small world.
Yep, there it is.
There you go. You run into a lot of people at Home Depot.
You never know who.
Ran
You
into,
never know who.
yeah, I ran into Roger Manning, Beck's keyboard player there once. Yeah. This fantastic gentleman, Michael Schultz from Fender. I mean, Home Depot's a happening spot if you're there at the right time.
So, can we change gears and ask just some questions specifically about Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul?
Absolutely. You can always change gears to talking about my most recent music. That's A-okay with me.
Hell yeah. All right. So, I love that you sort of laid out your feelings about how kind of useless the concept of genre is, because this album doesn't fit properly in one. Do you think it would be
Yes.
fair to say that this follows the decades-long tradition of pop music? I'm not talking about recent stuff where it is simply music and it doesn't so much matter what the form of it is.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. So would it be then fair to say that in the grander sense of things, it's pop music that's just gotten fucked up in a fun way?
I think a lot of it is.
Yeah.
And I'd like that you are able to throw the word pop in there because I think a modern listener, whatever the hell that means, would be like, this isn't pop music. But a lot of the greatest music of all time has been pop music. Unfortunately, it's become sort of watered down term or genre. But the band's also rock as well. I mean, if I had to sit there and say I'm alternative rock, I would be somewhat okay with that. But it's a lazy, stupid answer,
Well, yeah, I
And
mean, there was a lazy genre when we first came up with the name.
it's rock, but it's not rock, so it's alternative rock.
Yeah, like,
So
what the hell is that?
exactly, it's very stupid. So yeah, I mean that term works, but I have a lot of pop influence, a tremendous amount. I'm not saying pop in terms of Beyonce and whatever else, but
No, but in the grand tradition of pop, I mean, it's present in
exactly.
your vocal arrangement. That's for me what actually makes it really elevated from the standard kind of alt rock stuff is just how much thought went into the vocal arrangement and the harmony, and it's super obvious.
It's very refreshing to hear somebody who's appreciated it in that capacity. So thank you. But yeah, I really take pride in the versatility of the music. So as something can be heavy, there can be something equally as poppy or light or soft or aggressive. It's all over the place. And because I find a lot of inspiration in sound, that doesn't have to be confined to guitar, bass, drums. I love playing the piano. I love electronic instruments, synthesizers, drum machines. I love it all. And I really appreciate the hybrid aspect of combining things. That being said, I try to make it work in a way that is somewhat easy to take in as a listener. I mean, something that's always intrigued me is that anything that's truly great lives on many planes and has many layers to it. So I mean, I started this thing yesterday. Who knows how long I'll keep it up? But this thing on Instagram called Song of the Day. I mean, while you're in quarantine, you got to figure out ways to fill your time and entertain people who can't go to your shows or whatever. It was just on it was canceled, and I think it's great that so many bands are doing creative things to keep their fans and followers online entertained. But anyway, I came up with Song of the Day, where I just pick a favorite song of mine and kind of analyze it and discuss what I find so interesting about it. And the one I'm doing today, I don't know when our podcast of right now will be out, but what are we looking at? March 20th. So March 20th, the song I'm going to be discussing today is God Only Knows. Of course, it's a classic, Beach Boys. Everybody knows the song. But that song is the most perfect dichotomy of extremely complex and simple at the same time. And it's something that a casual music listener can say, God, yeah, I just really like this song and not really know anything about it. And it's something where you and I, as musicians, can really look at it as a incredible construction and be like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
And make it so easily listenable, So a lot of the greatest things have been both complex, sophisticated, but catchy and simple all at the same time. The Beatles were great at that, and I don't really think they had anything quite as complex, which also made them probably even more potent because they were just that much catchier, across the board. But I have taken that sort of train of thought into writing music, especially with Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul. I want something that has integrity and is creative and is pushing my limits, but I also don't want it to go over anybody's head, So how do I do both? And that is something I thought about a lot when writing these most recent songs.
Well, and you're doing something with so much of the structure of these songs that does remind me of So just, I guess, for background with their podcast, we went through the entirety of the Nine Inch Nails discography. We're currently going through Smashing Pumpkins, right?
Yep.
And it's something that they do, that the Beatles did, and so on and so forth. It's very judiciously do one weird thing at a time.
Yes.
Where you're allowing it. Yeah, Trent, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Well,
but it's so present.
Yeah, in Trent specifically, and I'm not saying this. I'm saying this purely as a listener, not as being friends with the guy or being in his band. But I would venture to say that, rhythm aside, 80% of it is weird. But the fact that he has a very simple melody that is easy to latch onto, on top of all that weirdness, is what makes it so unique, and what has made it so unique from the beginning. You know, weirdness knows no bounds, and he's obviously got an immaculate sense of rhythm, both as a player and as a programmer. So he's got the groove there, but then on top of the groove is a bunch of odd texture and interesting melodic choices, but the vocal melody is pretty simple most of the time, and I mean that in the most complimentary way. You know, so that's all those reasons add up to a tremendous career for him.
So clearly, you know a thing or two about doing that yourself. I was going through and counting, and I did end up losing count, but it seems like on Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul, there are maybe only 2 or 3 songs that are not in some sort of modified scale. Like, they're not in natural minor or natural major scales. It's like 80% of the record. So my question is,
wait, so hold on. I'm very impressed by this and intrigued. So you're saying there are only a handful of songs that are not in normal scales?
Yeah, there's only a handful of songs that are in normal scales is what I should say. Yes, slip the tongue there. No, because you're in Dorian and you're in Phrygian dominant, you're all over the place, and it's a lot of fun. But my question is, what did natural scales do to hurt you?
Sorry, the connection was kind of a bit in and out on the very last thing you said. What was the question?
So the question is, what did natural scales do to hurt you?
Nothing. The thing is that, as I stated at the very beginning, when I write songs, I'm not thinking about anything theoretically. It's just coming from experimenting, where my hands happen to land on the keys or on the fretboard, so on and so forth. And if I were to stick to a scale, it would perhaps sound a little too obvious. And I'm not saying that all songs that stick to scale are obvious. And like I said, theory is not what's present. So it's not like I thought, I'm going to stay out of the confines of this and I'm going to push boundaries. It just happens to be where my taste is and what my ear finds interesting. But I would love to ask you a question. And you could give me some examples of Phrygian, Dorian, the things that you just said. I would love to hear where you found these facts.
Oh gosh, I mean, I was sitting there taking off.
If not, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm very intrigued. And I'll often, even when I'm writing something, I go, why is it that I like that? That's when the comes in and I go, that's what I like. Okay.
Yeah, I've always been a sucker for anything Dorian, so I know that there was a couple of tracks on here that landed that way. But like I've been cramming all of your your discography into my brain for the last couple of days, so it's hard to keep straight which one's which. There was also a really good Lydian riff in the back half of the record, and I'm just having a hard time remembering which song it was, but I'm sitting there like, wow, he's just leaning into that augmented fourth, and wow, what the hell, that's awesome. You know
what, the Lydian or mixolydian stuff is probably burrowed its way into my ear via Jimmy Page, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I'd imagine. And I think it's always funny because people talk about Jimmy Page and mixolydian or Lydian phrases, and when he's been asked about it in the past, he didn't know what that was, which is awesome.
He's like, I don't know, I just played the note.
Exactly. And there's you may have seen this or not, but there's Composer's Appreciation of the Beatles. It was a BBC documentary. It's on YouTube, but this guy, his name is slipping my mind, but he does such an immense job of breaking down what it was that made so many of those songs incredible and timeless. And he does it in layman's terms, and he's talking about key changes. He's talking about modal melody, which is kind of what we're discussing right now. And he always states, he's like, I'm not saying that the Beatles knew about this. In fact, I'm positive they didn't.
Yeah.
But where would they have heard these things? And it could have been, old English folk songs, Celtic melodies. So things that just kind of seep their way into their psyche via culture. And I find that fascinating. But yeah, I'm really impressed that you've taken the time to sort of analyze what I do naturally, and it's much appreciated.
I gotta tell you, it never sounded like you were building specifically within a set of confines. It sounded like you were exploring all the available space. It was a really fun audible journey to go on.
Well, thank you. And I will tell you what, in terms of, whether I'm within a scale or not,
Mm.
I often ache for a key change because I feel like things get boring if that doesn't happen.
Oh yeah.
I feel like this weight that needs to be lifted off my shoulders, and the key change is the way to do it. And honestly, I particularly, for that very reason, love writing bridges, because bridges to me are the opportunity to jump out of what's already been established within the song. And depending on how out there the bridge may be, whether it's one or two sections, I always enjoy the challenge of finding a way to seamlessly bring it back. So, Sweet Kind of Suffering, for example, I really go elsewhere on the bridge, and finding a way to bring it back was so satisfying to me. And it's probably a decent reason as to why it's one of my favorites.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So now on to kind of the marketing of the record here. I know it kind of started off as a collection of EPs. Was that always the intent to then sum them into a record, or was that just something you figured out along the way?
It was figured out along the way. And so to be clear, all the songs were written. I wrote a total of 20 songs, actually, whittled it down to 16. And long story short, the idea presented itself based on the fact that most music is released sort of piecemeal these days, whether it be a single, a couple songs, EPs. I personally don't like EPs because they kind of don't seem like a complete idea, or they seem like a half-ass release. So this was the way of doing both, where the album was written, the album was called Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul. The title being 4 words lent itself to each word kind of being its own group, if you will. And I then went about looking at the songs lyrically and musically and seeing which ones work together. I thought 1 song would be a cop-out, 2 was a cop-out, 3 was and 4 seemed like a great amount of material to keep the listener tied over from release to release. So the thing that made all of this tick for me personally was the fact that when the last EP came out, it would then be presented as one entire rather lengthy album of 16 tracks. So you have the sort of fragmented listening experience of 4 song EPs, and those have their own song sequence, or you can sit down and really put in the time for a resequenced 16 track album comprising of the same songs. So they're very different listening experiences, but the idea of being able to do both is what made it appealing to me.
Cool. At that point, it's almost an experiment as well as a release, which is that's fun.
Exactly.
It's playing,
yeah. I mean, look, massive bands can say, "Hey, here's a song," and people devour it, and that's that. But I feel like a band of my size, I can't necessarily afford to do that, in the sense that one song would get swallowed up. And I also don't think, like I said, one song's enough. So kind of want to make a little bit of a statement with every release. And if you put out one song, it doesn't really indicate what everything else sounds like. If you put 4 songs, it at least indicates potential paths that the music takes. So yeah, I was content with the idea.
Very cool. All right. Is there anything you would like to add or remove from your Wikipedia page?
Probably all of it. I'm kidding. The thing I cannot fucking stand is the what's it called? This Guinness Book World Record nonsense.
For Woodstock or whatever. Yeah.
I'm not stand that. Maybe when I'm 50, I'll be like, "Oh, it was a cool thing I did when I was 11." And I'm not saying it's not cool. It's just, literally 20 years later, something of no significance to me. I'm baffled that it gets brought up. Now,
Well, it was just
as a
another gig, you know?
it was, and it's one that I legitimately don't remember. I mean, it's one. Imagine, and I'm not trying to be self-deprecating or overly modest, but imagine someone being like, "Hey, this thing you did when you were 11 that I find interesting, tell me about it." It's like I I have like three fuzzy mental images of that, and that's it. And I suppose the thing that's annoying and is the complete antithesis of what you are as an interviewer are people who literally go to Wikipedia, come up with the same bullshit questions, and ask me, and I have to go, "Oh my God, are we talking about this again?"
Really?
You
Again? Yeah.
clearly did not make it past paragraph one. And
Yeah.
it's like this bullshit thing you did when you're 11, Nine Inch Nails, Angels and Airwaves, New Regime, cool. It's like, oh God. I mean, this is really a shining example of why media is just taking a dive, with that kind of lack of integrity and, quality
Yeah.
control, so many things. But as I was answering the thing that actually irritates me, one of my friends was joking around and decided to change something in the first paragraph. I thought he was joking. And then somebody interviewed me and they're like, "What's this about you adopting cats?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about right now?" And I mean, that was the most normal thing that he
Yeah.
typed as a joke. There were some other things that made zero sense whatsoever. And, talking about my vegan lifestyle, I'm an enormous carnivore and so on and so forth. And I was like, "You dick. Like, people actually read this shit." And somebody was asking me, and I had no idea what he's talking about until I realized that you were being a funny asshole and decided to write all this nonsense. But yeah, and honestly,
Solid prank, though.
yeah, above and beyond those two things, I can't say I read my Wikipedia and actually know what's on there. I'm sure I would cringe if I read through it.
Yeah. All right. Well, last question. Is there something that you wish people would ask you in interviews that they don't?
Man, honestly, no. And I would find it weird if I or anybody who's being interviewed was saying, "God, I hope you ask me this question."
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
I'm here to answer your questions and what you want to know, not necessarily doing this or any other interview because I'm dying to tell you something. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'll have a think about it, but nothing is coming to mind.
All
I
right.
definitely have my, I hope he doesn't bring this up because I'm gonna sidestep that minefield. But
Well, I won't ask you that one.
I appreciate
Whatever
it.
that may be.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are plenty of things through most people's histories where you kind of just want to brush them under the rug, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, fortunately, that doesn't really happen much either, with the exception of my notorious world record that people seem to care about for some reason. I certainly don't. But
Yeah.
yeah, but like I said, I really appreciate
All right.
your level of research and your skills as an interviewer. So thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Can't wait to hear what you got coming next.
Sounds good, man. Be safe.
The songs from the quarantine, yeah?
Cool. Yeah. Keep your hazmat suit zipped.
Yep.
Continue to bathe in hand sanitizer, and perhaps we'll speak again sometime.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care.